Third phase of moon.
Let's get back to what happened this morning. I was getting a bunch of phone calls early here, and I'm sure everybody else was, about the Ukraine tragedy and another Malaysian flight gone down. We don't know what happened to the first one. Isn't it quite ironic, kind of straight out of a Twilight Zone movie? Like you say, anything's possible, but wow. Two major incidents of airline disasters within, less than a half a year, coming from a destination and leading to the same airport. You got the same spokesman up there. It's almost like with a deja vu. Did you think that this was quite strange? What's your take on this, Congressman Cook?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt even now. I mean, again, I don't want to be too premature here, but I don't think there's any doubt that at the highest levels of the Russian military or government, and I'm not necessarily saying right now that Putin ordered that, but at the very highest levels, and it could have been even unauthorized as far as Putin was concerned, I don't know, but at those high levels, somebody ordered their sympathizers or their actual Russian military right there in the Ukraine, in the eastern part there, to shoot that plane down. Some high-level Russian did that. I would bet my bottom dollar on that, okay? Because that's what happened. Now, I've always thought there was something very strange about that first the March Malaysian flight. I forget the numbers for sure. But excuse me?
It was a Flight 370, the Malaysian flight.
Right. I think there's a lot more to that one than they've reported on the news. I just can't imagine. Well, and yet maybe it's just sitting there somewhere in the bottom of that south ocean, not far off Australia. They just can't find it. I don't know. I don't quite believe it. I think with this thing being shot down the way it was by clearly one of the major powers of this world, the Russian government, I think there might be something very sinister, very much a terrorist operation, or even a governmental operation on the part of what Ronald Reagan used to accurately describe as the evil empire. Is not out of the question. Now, I don't want to say that I know anything about that, or that's total speculation, but I never did quite believe that it just went down approximately where they think it went down. It could have, but hey, it makes me wonder if somewhere in a part of the world that would be hard to get to, there's something either crashed or. I'm not convinced that's even in the ocean. I mean,
well, it's almost like when we saw...
Especially when I've expressed that, but when I saw this situation today, I thought, man, I mean, we were able, because this was right over the Ukraine, because some of our satellites captured the launching of the surface-to-air missile that took it down and captured the actual explosion there. Doesn't mean we could have always captured every one of those in the past, that we certainly would be able to do it over the Ukraine because we're watching that area so carefully right now. But were our satellites watching the jungles of, wherever that flight could have, I'm talking about the March flight, could have gone? I just don't know. I don't think they know a whole lot still. I just don't know. But I don't. I think it's still such an open question. We'll probably never know for sure. But hey, when it's clear the Russians have done that, and then Putin comes on the air today and says it was what the Ukraine did. The Ukraine government did that. I mean, that tells me that you can't. That tells me that as much as our government will sometimes hide and lie and misrepresent and do bad things, we're compared to some of those guys, some of those world-class criminals. Let me put it that way. We're lily white, and we're not lily white in terms of what our government does. But boy, I just thankful I'm in the U.S. of A. instead of someplace like the old, Russia. I'll put it that way. I wouldn't trust North Korea or China with anything when it comes to military or anything that they could do secretly and hurt or cause trouble. They would do, in my opinion. So anything could be happening.
On top of that news that Blake mentioned today about the crash, which was not a crash, the evidence shows that it was shot down.
Clearly shot down, right.
The other news is the ground invasion into Gaza. What do you think about that? What are the implications of that to us?
Well, I'm not exactly, when the news says there's a ground invasion of Gaza, I don't know precisely what they're talking about. Now, if you listen to the military, the Israeli military, they're saying, well, we're doing an incursion to check out these tunnels that, and so I don't know what's really happening, whether it's a ground, but there's clearly ground movement. There's no doubt about that into Gaza. And this thing between shooting these things back and forth between Israel and Gaza is just awful, and needs to stop. And so it's whatever's happening over there just shows there's a major escalation going on. But I don't think when they say a ground invasion of Gaza, that implies tanks running right into Gaza City and right into those areas and maybe going house to house with combat troops. Nothing like that is happening so far. I'm not saying it couldn't happen in the next few days, but but we don't know. All we have is what Israel says, is that they're doing an incursion on the tunnels. So I hope that's true, because I don't want to see this escalate anymore. I don't know that it's true. Yeah, I don't trust either side when it comes to telling the truth about what's happening. Okay. I do support the state of Israel. It's right to be there. I strongly support that, but I don't necessarily trust what they put out, or I don't trust what the Palestinian, Hamas, Hezbollah, whatever they put out. I don't trust that either, obviously, but.
It's a tricky situation over there in the Middle East. Hamas launching missiles, and Israel's got to defend itself with the Iron Dome. But right now it's kind of one-sided on the casualty rate. And
sure is.
It's still amazing with the destruction going on how still low the civilians.
That's why Israel needs to be very, very careful here and realize that what. It's just shooting, killing. There's been over 200 Palestinians killed, since this started 10 days ago, I guess it was, or so. I don't think an Israeli's been killed from what I've heard.
Only one.
Okay. And nobody wants rockets fired at them, and nobody should have to accept that. But having said all that, Israel needs to be particularly careful not to overreact when they do have that dome. And because they do have that dome, of course, they claim that the dome is keeping them from having to overreact. But, with an average of 20 or 30 people being killed, a lot of which are kids and, women and, over 200 civilians have been killed. but the Palestinians need to get the sense to quit lobbing those rockets over to Israel too. So we definitely need to hope and pray that gets solved real quick.
Back to today's tragedy again. Isn't it quite when 9/11 happened, everybody saw the first airplane. Well, they said, okay, an airplane hit the Trade Center, and then this is a tragic accident, and then everybody saw then when the second one hit, we knew right away this was an attack, and this was an accident. And to me, that's what I'm thinking right here today. This Malaysian conspiracy, you got this Malaysian company, and they're being victimized twice, and it's a first time, in less than 6 months or around a half a year ago, you got two major incidents. This is pretty much like, okay, now this isn't an accident anymore. Something's going on.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you on that because of this. When that, I happened to just be watching TV that morning when 9/11, and when that first hit, I said, "Oh, that has to be a terrorist action." But I said, "But not for sure." But boy, when that second one did, then you knew. There was just no doubt in your mind. So I think something parallel could very likely be the situation with the Malaysia situation. What are the chances that you would have two of those happen over a period of what has been about 3 or 4 months, maybe?
Under 6.
And the thing is, we know for sure what happened on this one. We know this was shot down by either a high-level Russian military person or one of their supporters in the Ukraine, or whether it's and so even when they were saying, oh, we know that it's got to, the Australians were saying Malaysia has to be down in this area. Even then, I wasn't sure that was right, that it could be something else happening. And now I really believe something else happened.
Well, it's just this mystery Congressman Cook, again, hours before the Malaysian flight, MH117 is the number. A man by the name of Korpan took a photo of this airplane. Apparently, he boarded it right afterwards, and he said, if it disappears, this is what it looks like. He posted it to his Facebook. It's basically the last image of Malaysia flight MH17. Again, the mystery deepens. What's going on with the Malaysian Airlines? We put out there in the beginning a statement because it is a mystery. There's no trace or evidence with today's technology. You would have thought that this missing Flight 370 would have showed up by now, and still no trace. We brought in theories of third phase moon. People contacted us and said there's possible, maybe alien intervention. Maybe there was a massive mass abduction or a time portal. Anyway, these are some of the big theories that we get at the moon. We're not exactly sure if that's...
Right, and let me just say that anything is possible. That is even possible. But let me say this, and I, because it gets right back to this, the main topic here today is related to that citizen hearing. There were a number of witnesses. I would say there was 6 or 7 that were particularly compelling in this sense. And the sense I'm going to tell you is that what they observed and what they were right involved in, and it wasn't just them, it was dozens, even hundreds, in some cases thousands of people observing with them things that imply there's no other explanation but an extraterrestrial origin for the explanation. But so I want to make that clear when I was talking. That's not necessarily proof, but if I could just mention real quickly before I then get back to this Malaysian thing that you want to talk about, that whether it was Burroughs and Pennison, as I mentioned, whether it was John Callahan of the FAA, some of the things that he explained as sitting right there in the catbird seat of the Federal Aviation Administration. And I want to take my hat off to what I thought. I would give the ruby stick pin, as I call it, the highest accolade to two witnesses that I thought were just so outstanding that if anybody heard them, they would believe that there's no other explanation besides either an extraterrestrial origin for what clearly was a UFO. And those two witnesses are Robert Salas, and also from the United States. He was the missile launch officer up there in Montana back in 1967 when he witnessed and was involved in something that even the Air Force later acknowledged to the point of changing their entire missile security system as a result of what he experienced. I thought he was particularly compelling as he explained what he witnessed, what he saw, to the point that there had to be, some extraterrestrial, or I always use this word interdimensional, because it's possible that we're not being able to witness all the dimensions. We know that. I mean, we don't know that, but we suspect that. And so just because I'm saying that maybe they didn't provide absolute proof in the sense of, absolute smoking gun proof, they provided evidence where it's pretty hard to explain it other than extraterrestrial. And I mention this for this reason. The only reason I came back to this is because if we get the public, now approximately 30% of the public believes in an extraterrestrial. They believe that they've somehow witnessed an alien or an extraterrestrial intelligent being. But about 70% of the people think it's crackpot, it's crazy stuff. And what I'm trying to say here is if the entire U.S. public, the entire, all Americans were aware of what Robert Salas had to say, or Lieutenant Colonel Oscar Santa Maria of the Peruvian Air Force, which I'm sure you've talked about on your program, if anybody were to listen to them and hear their stories, in particular, Colonel Santa Maria up there shooting at and describing it as he's going along, shooting at an unidentified flying object that was they thought was a security threat to his Air Force base there in Peru, and having proof that even the United States thought there was something to it because there was cable set from the State Department that admitted that if it was Santa Maria describing it, it had to be true. That the public doesn't even know about. So what I'm trying to say is, and again, I kind of highlighted those 4 or 5 situations because they stuck out to me as they were being explained. Things that it's really hard to explain without then coming to the conclusion there had to be an extraterrestrial source. Now, having said that, so when I talk about absolute proof, just because I don't
incidents of airline disasters within less than a half a year coming from a destination and leaving to the same airport. You got the same spokesman up there. It's almost like with a deja vu. Did you think that this was quite strange? What's your take on this, Congressman Cook?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt even now. I mean, again, I don't want to be too premature here, but I don't think there's any doubt that I forget the numbers for sure. But excuse me?
It was a Flight 370, the Malaysian flight.
Right. I think there's a lot more to that one than they've reported on the news. I just can't imagine. Well, and yet maybe it's just sitting there, some Russian military right there in the Ukraine, in the eastern part there, to shoot that plane down. Some high-level Russian did that. I would bet my bottom dollar on that, okay? Because that's what happened. Now, I've always thought there was something very strange about that first Malaysia, well, the March Malaysian, right at the highest levels of the Russian military or government. And I'm not necessarily saying right now that Putin ordered that, but at the very highest level, and it could have been even unauthorized as far as Putin was concerned, I don't know, but at those high levels, somebody ordered their sympathizers or their actual
Thirdphaseofmoon.
Let's get back to what happened this morning. I was getting a bunch of phone calls early here, and I'm sure everybody else was, about the Ukraine tragedy and another Malaysian flight gone down. We don't know what happened to the first one. Isn't it quite ironic, kind of straight out of a Twilight Zone movie? Like you say, anything's possible, but wow. Two major